Hi, everyone. Mitch from Pick Dawgz here with Chris and Ron. We are here with week 9 of the college football 2024 season, just like that. About a month left to go in the regular season, maybe a little bit more, but a lot to be decided. A lot has been decided, but hasn't been decided, as they say, when it comes to college football polling. And the results on the field, well, sometimes it's not decided on the field. Chris, you ready to decide it on the field?
I think I am. Yeah, still got a new number one crowned. We're close to our first set of college football playoff rankings for the season, so ready to see if those get shaken up this week.
Shaken, not stirred. Ron, how about you?
I think there's going to be some shaking up this week. I see some potential upsets, especially in Orlando. There could be one, but we'll get into it.
Yep, the Magic looking pretty decent after picking up Contavious Caldwell Pope to pick up that franchise. But at the same time, a lot of still unanswered questions from last year. Which Wagner is it? Anyways, got college football, though, in this video. College basketball, NBA basketball, all that sort of stuff. College basketball on the way November 4th. NBA, of course, has already started by the time you've watched this video, so be sure to tune in for the jam session. Anyways, let's get right into it with week 9 of college football action. One of the unbeatens here taking the field. It is the Pitt Panthers taking on Syracuse. Pitt not really getting a lot of love from the pollsters, even though they continue to get it done on the field. And once again, a favorite here in ACC action. Chris?
Yeah, I think they can get it done here as well, but I think 6 is just a little bit too much for me in this one. I think Pitt wins this one by a field goal. There's been a few times this season where Pitt's kind of had some close calls. Last week against Cal, only winning by 2. West Virginia, they beat by 4. Cincinnati, they had to rally to beat by a single point. This is a solid Syracuse offense, and even though Kyle McCord's had some questionable second halves, I think that Syracuse can do enough to keep this one within 6. So I'm going to take Syracuse in the points.
Ron?
Yeah, I'm going to look towards the over in this game. I think when you look at Pitt's strength of schedule is pretty lacking so far. I think Syracuse is one of the tougher offenses that they've faced this season. But Pitt's offense, they've had plenty of games with over 300 passing yards. This has been a potent offense, 41 points per game. Syracuse, I think, is one of the weaker defensive teams in the ACC. So I think we see a ton of scoring, especially at the pace that Pittsburgh looks to play at. And there's a reason this total's in the 60s, so give me the over.
I like that over as well, but I think I'm also going to take the points with Syracuse. I just think that this is one of these back and forth games, last team with the ball type game that wins the game, or at least covers the spread. I think Syracuse at least covers the spread in this one, if not pulls the outright upset. Go to Friday night college football action. As it just tells you where the world of college football is right now. We're going to look at UNLV versus Boise State on the same night, where the ACC and the Big Ten are both in action. Ron, UNLV Boise at Sam Boyd.
I guess you have to call me Ronnie Totals because I'm looking at another one in this game. I like the under in this one. I think when you look at both of these teams on the surface, they look like potent offenses. They are so far this year. Boise State, a Heisman candidate at running back, and UNLV's been a really fun team to watch. But I just think that these defenses actually match up quite well with the opposing offenses. We know Boise's going to look to run the ball all game long, but UNLV's run defense has been pretty stellar this year. They've only had one game where they've given up more than 5 yards per carry. So I do think this is going to be the toughest defense that Boise State has faced this year. Also, UNLV's been getting a lot of pressure on opposing quarterbacks lately, 9 sacks the last 2 games. So I think Boise State's offense struggles a bit. UNLV, while their quarterback change hasn't been a big deal in terms of the win-loss record recently, I still think that Malik Williams, while he's been fine as a game manager, not as good of a passer. We're starting to see, last game only 196 passing yards, 15 to 27 completion. I do think Boise's going to be able to stop the run. I don't love that Boise State secondary, but I just don't think UNLV is going to be able to beat them through the air too often in this game. So I like the I like the under and Boise UNLV.
Yeah, actually, this game being played indoors at Allegiant Stadium, but I like Boise in this one. UNLV was certainly a public darling, for the better part of the season, but I think Boise just a little bit too much for them. I think that these teams will go blow for blow, punch for punch, but I think Boise punches a little bit harder, especially as the calendar moves deeper into the season. Just traditionally a team that plays better as the year goes on. I like UNLV, but I like them when they're a road dog. I don't love them necessarily in this spot. Boy, Friday night in Vegas, college football at Allegiant Stadium, boy, right next to where we usually stay. Oh, man, it makes me a little not homesick, but I guess Vegas sick. Chris, speaking of Vegas sick, what do you think?
I think the word you're looking for is FOMO, but no, I'm with Ron here. I'm gonna take the under. Boise State showed no problem slowing down that go-go offense in the Mountain West title game last year. Held UNLV to 20 points, and I think Boise State's defense is going to be solid once again. But like we alluded to, this UNLV defense has been solid against the run, and I think they can at least slow down Ashton Genty. I don't know if they can stop him completely here, but I think that this is going to be one of these knockdown, drag-out kind of games. 66 is way too high for me in this one. I think this one's going to finish closer into the 50s. So give me the under 66 between Boise and UNLV.
We head to the old horseshoe in Columbus, where the Ohio State Buckeyes haven't hit the field since that loss to Oregon, taking on Nebraska, who was absolutely shellacked last week in Bloomington by Indiana. The 6.5-point dogs in that one. They had chances early, didn't convert, and then once Indiana started going downhill on them, it was all over. And, Ohio State, a team that certainly has the chances to go downhill on you, but it just doesn't seem that they do it all that much. And, for me, it's like I still think Nebraska can create some sort of problems here from Ohio State for Ohio State. And I think Ohio State creates some problems for themselves. I still think Will Howard has got some issues there under center. And I think this Nebraska defensive line gives him problems. And I think with Nebraska losing so big last week, I think all the value is on the Huskers. I'm going to take Nebraska. Chris?
Yeah, I'm going to take Nebraska as well. I think it can only go up from here for Nebraska after looking terrible last week, and potential maybe look ahead for Ohio State with Penn State on deck. So I'm going to lean towards Nebraska here. I think they at least put forth a better showing here. Maybe keep within 3 touchdowns, 38-17. So give me the points with the Huskers here.
Ron?
Yeah, for me, I agree with Mitch in the fact that Nebraska getting crushed. I think the line, maybe getting a better price than you would have if it was a closer game last week for the Huskers, but I still just can't get there. We mentioned earlier in the season that Raiola was playing well against some of the weaker teams on his schedule, but as he gets into the thick of the Big Ten defenses that he has to face, the inexperience may show. And we saw that, a lot of turnovers last week for Nebraska. It's just a game where I think if Ohio State gets up big, 21, 28 points early, they're just never going to look back, because I just don't think Nebraska has the offense to keep up. And that's why I just think I see that happening too often in a game like this for the Buckeyes, especially off a loss, to come out, fast start, and never look back. So I'll lay the points with the Buckeyes.
We head to MetLife Stadium in the Meadowlands, where Navy takes on Notre Dame. Been a long time since we've seen a Navy team undefeated 6 games into the regular season. Notre Dame, the team with the loss, and for Notre Dame, it's been feast or famine this season. Chris, they feast or they famine? Which one will it be?
It's going to be interesting to see, but I do think that Navy, this is a really good Navy team, and I'm going to take Navy in the points in this one. I know Notre Dame's dominated the head-to-head in recent years, but this is arguably the best Navy team that they've had over the last, 40, 50 years. I don't even know. So I think Navy can keep this one respectable, and if Navy could pull off the outright upset here, it would be massive for their claim to try to make the college football playoff. So give me Navy here. Give me the 13 points.
Ron?
Yeah, this is a great Navy team. It's fun to watch. It's nice to see, this team have this much success to start the year. But we do have to look at the strength of schedule and the fact that they played Bucknell, Temple, Memphis, UAB, Air Force, and Charlotte. I mean, the toughest team in that stretch is Memphis. That was also, a back-and-forth shootout, and it was a nice win for Navy, but none of those teams even close to Notre Dame defensively. I think that's where we're really going to see Navy, start to struggle. I think that offense, triple option, it's been great to watch, but against Notre Dame and that defensive line, I mean, they have a great run defense, so I don't think that they move the ball as well. And then that Navy defense, I don't trust it at all. While Notre Dame maybe not as potent offensively this year as in recent years, I still think they'll be able to put up plenty of points and win this game and cover the number. Some
solid disrespect for Bucknell there coming from Ron Romanelli. I I kind of like Navy in this one plus the points. I think this game is going to be a lower scoring game, even though that Navy defense is a sieve. But the thing that we know about Navy, man, they can execute. And I think Notre Dame's defense will stand up. But I think the problem that they have is, Navy's going to be on schedule 3 yards, 4 yards a pop. So it's just going to be longer drives out of Navy than we're accustomed to seeing. And I think Notre Dame is a little less disciplined. Sometimes those teams with the better athletes, guys trying to make plays, stand up, be superstars, as opposed to against a team like Navy, you got to basically do your job, type thing. And I don't know. I could see that creating some wrinkles here for the middies. I'm gonna take Navy in this one plus the points. We move on to Bloomington, Indiana, where the Hoosiers undefeated. It's the one of the big stories of the season. It's still flying a little under the radar. Somehow this team ranked behind a lot of one-lossers out there. Have one of two teams to not trail in a game this season, up against Washington, who's been hit and miss. Ron?
Yeah, last week I called Chris a square for taking Indiana, and I had to eat crow on that one. I say let's go double or nothing. I'm going to go Washington in this one. You got to tip your cap to Indiana and Kurt Cignetti. It's been an unbelievable, bounce back from what we saw last year. And not just last year, the last few years for this program. To see them undefeated, like Mitch mentioned, never trailing. This has been an impressive start. But there's a reason they were less than a touchdown favorite in this game. I do think they are a little bit overrated, and I do think Washington's a little bit underrated. I still think that this Washington team, while they lost a lot of pieces from last year's championship run, still a very strong defensive team, an experienced quarterback. I trust the offense. I think they move the ball well. I think Washington wins this game outright, but I'm going to take the points.
I like Washington as well. I think sometimes teams need to have a stinker game like Washington had last week. I think the Washington we see this week is a lot closer to the team that beat Weber State earlier this season. I just like the way that the Huskies, certainly just have a lot of talent on this roster. There's a lot of things going on here in Washington. You have a new coach, a new system. You have, different players coming in and out as well. I think it's going to take Fish a little bit to get his guys in there. But certainly if it comes to the X's and O's, I think Washington has a big advantage there. And I don't think they have the athletic advantage that, even though they're undefeated, Indiana's, that they've had kind of against some of these other teams. I think Washington's got the speed to handle them and avoid some of those big home run plays. And I'm going to take Washington to bounce back after last week's dreadful performance.
You want to go double or nothing? How about nothing? Let's take Indiana again. Death, taxes, and me taking Indiana when they're on the schedule. 3 sure things in life. It just the line, the lines dropped because Curtis Rourke, is out for this game. They're turning to Taven Jackson, but Jackson does have some experience. He played, I think, 5 games last year for Indiana before they made the quarterback switch, but still. Kurt Cignetti, I can't stress enough that the change that he's made for this Indiana team. And this is an Indiana team that if they were passing the football, I think they'd be in trouble. This is, from a statistical standpoint, the best pass defense in the country. But this is a run-heavy Indiana offense. They're 37th in rushing attempts per game, and that's where you can attack Washington's defense. So getting this under a touchdown, I'll lay the points with Indiana here.
Next up, we go to Ole Miss, where Ole Miss takes on Oklahoma. Oklahoma just really in some deep doo-doo this season, missing all their wide receivers still and just don't have the offensive firepower that they need to compete in the SEC. It's funny how sometimes these things, it's more of a coincidence. It's like when TCU entered the Big 12, all of a sudden they have their worst season they've had in 20 years because they had the worst players they had in 20 years. And I think Oklahoma's got a lot of those same problems here entering the SEC this year. Up against an Ole Miss team, though, with Lane Kiffin, these guys just seem to be a step short. That game against LSU, just horrible the way that ended for them. 2 touchdowns on the final 2 plays from LSU. One of those being their last offensive play in regulation, and the next one being the first offensive play in overtime, giving up touchdowns on both of those plays, both of them long touchdowns, to be honest with you. But I think Ole Miss biding their time. Jackson Dart, playing out the string here at Ole Miss, gearing up for the Arch Manning arrival as he departs Texas after this season. His grandfather played at Ole Miss, his uncle played at Ole Miss, and Arch is playing at Ole Miss too after this season. So I would not be surprised to see the Arch Manning show in town in Ole Miss after this year. I think it was pretty much written before he ever even signed at Texas. But I think at the same time, they got to play for the present. I think Ole Miss still believes that they have a shot to make the playoff, but they got to win out at this point because they're not going to get the breaks that a 2-loss Alabama team or a 2-loss Texas team or a 2-loss Georgia team is going to get, or even a 2-loss LSU team. So I'm going to take Ole Miss in this one. I think they batter the Sooners pretty badly. Chris?
So you're almost saying this is a recruiting trip for Arch Manning. He's going to be at Ole Miss for this one, but no,
he's not going to be at Ole Miss. I'm just saying that the same thing I said the day Arch Manning signed with Texas. He will be playing at Ole Miss, and I think when your head coach sticks you out into the field in a hopeless cause, where the only thing that could possibly happen to you is you probably get injured, you got to rethink what you're doing. And I think Arch Manning does that. I think he does. And I think with Jackson Dart leaving, this year at Ole Miss, it's only logical that he transfers.
Oh,
his grandfather played there. His uncle played there.
Yep. The lineage.
It's like Lieutenant Dan. His grandfather died in the war. His great-grandfather died in the war.
Well, even if it's a fate of Oklahoma more than anything else, I'm taking Ole Miss here. This is an Oklahoma team that's lost 3 of their 4 SEC games by double digits, all at home. And that one road game that they had, that win over Auburn, could have easily been a double-digit loss. They were down 21-10, about 9 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. And Auburn lost that game. Oklahoma didn't win, and Auburn lost it. And I think that Ole Miss just steamrolls Oklahoma here. Oklahoma's been outscored 69-12 in the last 2 weeks. Yeah, give me Ole Miss here in a beatdown.
Ron?
I'm going to hold my nose and take Oklahoma here. In a game where I don't think many points are going to be scored, getting almost 3 touchdowns and potentially 3 touchdowns by kickoff, I think is rather valuable. I still think this is a very good Oklahoma defense. It's a miserable offense. We've seen in the last few weeks the offensive line is really not held up. But I think that Oklahoma's defense does enough. I just wouldn't want to be laying this many points with an Ole Miss team. It's still dropped 2 of its last 3, and its offense has looked pretty ugly recently. So give me the points.
Next up, we head to Alton Stadium in Oregon, where the Ducks, #1 in the nation, take on a 1-loss Illinois team who dominated Michigan last week at home in the uniforms. The Red Grange uniforms. The Ducks at 7-0, they are #1, but boy, they just really don't seem an overly impressive #1 team. We see #1 teams sometimes that don't look overly impressive. It's rare that you see an unimpressive #1 like Michigan win like they did last year. But usually, usually these teams like this, they kind of just fall to the wayside. Don't even really factor in the end. We'll have to see how the Ducks pan out when all is said and done. Ron, what do you think of this one?
I like the Ducks in this game. I mean, Illinois, we saw them in that last step-up game on the road against Penn State. They covered, but really was not a great performance. Only 7 points, 219 yards. And I think the key for me is I don't think Illinois has a sturdy passing game. I think Oregon's going to be able to stop the run a little bit better than they did against Purdue last week. But Oregon handled that game, and it was kind of a trap situation at Purdue after Purdue played really well. It was a blowout, from start to finish for Oregon. And I like Oregon to win this game and cover the number. I still think this is the most impressive team. I think they're deserving of that #1 spot next to their name, and I like their chances to win this game in blowout fashion.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if Oregon breaks out the Red Grange uniforms for this week. I'm not really sure what they're exactly going to be wearing, but we know it's going to be something special. But I think that, Oregon, for me, I'm just still less than convinced. They certainly have the speed, to put teams away. But overall, man, they just look like they can be had. It's like there are certain teams that are going to match up well against the Ducks and, who could beat them. Like, I'm a Miami fan. I'm realistic that we probably don't have a very good chance against Georgia. But I think, against Oregon, we might have a shot, So it's like, very similar type situation. I just think that I think Illinois is going to, try and get physical with them. I think it's going to be dicey down to the end, kind of like Oregon's cover last week. But I think this time we get the cover with Illinois. I mean, last week with Oregon, it came right down to the wire on that laying that big number. Next up. Oh, you're up, Chris.
Yeah, and for me in this one, I'm leaning towards Illinois in the points. I don't feel as strongly about it as I did when I was first looking at the lines. But now that we're getting just over 3 touchdowns, I think that hook could come into play here. I know ranked versus ranked matchups historically, the favorite has covered them, especially in with these big numbers. But 21.5 for me just seems like a touch too many. I'm going to go with Illinois in the points.
Next up, we head to the bounce house as UCF takes on BYU. BYU, well, the march continues on, 7-0 on the season. UCF, a disappointing 3-4. A change at quarterback last week. I thought they played really well in that Iowa State game. I thought they had every chance to win that thing. Let it get away from them, but they did cover the spread pretty easily. I think in this one, though, I think BYU continues to get disrespected and is a 2.5-point road favorite. This is kind of where they've been at their best, is when you see these tiny little lines in these BYU games. I don't know, man. I trust UCF about 0. They just have not been very good this season. While Gus Malzahn is one of the better head coaches in college football, not this year. He's not. And you can see I never agreed with him getting fired at Auburn, but I wouldn't be too shocked if he gets run out here at UCF. Chris?
Yeah, I'm leaning towards BYU as well here. I know this line looks funky, but like you said, we've been seeing BYU get disrespected all season long. I'm still not getting back on board with UCF, even at the bounce house. This is, a BYU team that can be had on the ground. It's the weakness of their defense, but I still think the BYU is just too big, too physical for UCF here. I'm going to take BYU.
Ron?
Do I even have to say it? I love this spot for UCF. BYU, and a clear letdown spot after, basically buzzer beater win against Oklahoma State, which they were exposed in that game. I mean, Oklahoma State was playing just as poorly as UCF was, and they honestly deserved to win that football game. If you watched it, 7.3 yards per carry for Oklahoma State on the ground. Now you have UCF, who we know can run the football. They had almost 10 yards a carry last week against a very good Iowa State defense. At home, I love this spot for UCF.
Next up, we head to Tuscaloosa, where the Crimson Tide take on Mizzou. Alabama, they're out of outs, as they say. They lose one more. I think they are pretty much done as far as the college football playoff goes. But who knows, man? The Dirty Tricks Committee probably put them in above a one-loss Clemson or Miami, even with 3 losses. But here they are against Mizzou, who's been hot and cold at times. Ron, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm not big on this Missouri team. I think this is a good spot for Alabama to get a bit of a statement win. I mean, not a crazy big win, but like you said, they don't really have any more chances to lose. I don't think a 3-loss Bama team makes the playoff, especially when you look down the stretch. Their schedule: Mercer, Oklahoma, and Auburn. Not going to get really any big wins there. So I think when you look at Alabama defensively, still a team I'm not ready to give up on. They get good pressure on the quarterback. I've not really liked this Missouri offensive line recently. The run game's been very inconsistent. Like you said, they've just been a hot and cold team. Defensively, still very sound, but I think Alabama is just too much at home.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think I like Missouri in this one. This Alabama secondary is just absolutely terrible, and I think up against these Missouri wide receivers, and I think up against if Cook plays, he's mobile, and I think he creates all sorts of problems here for Alabama. They run up to try and stop him. He throws it over the top. He's got receivers that can burn this Alabama secondary. And then going the other way, it's the same thing. You let him run, he's going to chew up some yards and pick up some first downs. I think the Missouri defense is probably good enough. Alabama just seems disjointed on offense. I think DeBoer in for a rough offseason at Alabama, and I think he's going to be on one of these very, very hot seats that they have in Tuscaloosa that happen whenever a big guy leaves. I mentioned this at the beginning of the season. I'm going to continue to say it. Replacing a legend, especially at Alabama, is not an easy task, and they have never had success replacing one on a back-to-back, like out of the gate. They've never had. So, you look at the replacements for Bear Bryant, look at the replacements for Gene Stallings, look at the replacement for Nick Saban. Not fun. Chris?
Yeah, I'm going to take the over here. I can't trust this Alabama defense. You can't also, trust them to lay 2 touchdowns. I do think Alabama wins this game, but yeah, I think that Missouri could have a solid day against this Alabama secondary. It's been prone to giving up big plays for the better part of the season, but I also think Alabama can do some damage here. We've seen Missouri get slaughtered in a lot of their step-up games. or at least the one big step up game in conference play against Texas A&M. So I'm going to go with the over 56 here. I think we see a lot of points in this one.
Next up, we head to Nashville, where Vandy hosts Texas. Texas got it absolutely handed to them last week by Georgia. I say it again, said it 100 times. Those two teams play 100 times. Georgia wins 100 times. That's how one-sided that game was, and that's how bad the coaching mismatch was in that game. And I tell you, Vandy beats Texas after beating Alabama earlier this season. They're going to make a movie about this team and about their quarterback and about everybody else just about involved there. They'll even make some stuff up about the head coach and his family and grandmother and whatever else they need to make this Disney movie happen. And I think there's a good chance of it because what we saw are holes in this Texas team, bad holes. And we saw holes, especially in the coaching and game planning, which we knew were suspect to begin with, but really exposed against Georgia. One of the best decleater hits we've seen in years in college football since that Javon Clowney hit on Shoelace in the bowl game. Really, that decleater of yours to set the tone in that game. And once that hit happened, it was 23-0 next time we looked up. Of course, they tried to give Texas the game, did the best they could. I don't think pass interference is a reviewable call at any level of football, but apparently it is now. But I don't think that they're going to get the break on this one. I think Vandy pulls another upset. I'm going to take Vandy on the money line in this one. Chris?
I'm going to take Vandy in the points with just a sprinkle on the money line. Not a heavy dumping on the money line, but a little bit here because
as long as it's not a tinkle, it's just because the dumping, the tinkle, not good.
Yeah. But Vandy this season as a double-digit underdog, 4-0 ATS with 3 outright wins. Diego Pavia he has this swagger that he's brought to Vandy, and they are not afraid of any Goliath. They are going headfirst into it. And I think Vandy keeps this one respectable. I am taking Vandy in the points.
Ron?
Well, I think if they make that Disney movie, they may want to leave out the outright loss to Georgia State and the lackluster showing against Ball State. I'm still not necessarily completely sold on this Vanderbilt team. They've been a fun team to watch. I mean, this is a program that's been miserable in the SEC for I don't know how long, and now they finally put together not just the win against Bama, but some other nice wins at Kentucky included, Virginia Tech at the beginning of the season. But I still think that Texas, especially off a loss, the much better team in this spot. I think we're getting a really good price with Texas because of the recent results. If Vandy didn't upset Alabama and if Texas didn't lose last week, this line would be probably in the 30s. So we're getting a really good price with the much better team. I'm laying the points.
Next up, we head to Hard Rock Stadium in Miami Gardens, where the Hurricanes take on the Seminoles. Seminoles just one win on the season. The Canes unbeaten coming into this one. The defense has looked absolutely hideous for Miami, but the offense has looked really, really good. Heisman worthy on offense and, I don't know, fired defensive coordinator worthy on the defense. Chris, what do you think?
I'm taking Miami all day here. Just another day where you see Florida State on the schedule. I'm going the other way. I know it's a rivalry game. I know a lot of times you can throw the record book out the window, but I think one thing that should be thrown out the window is this Florida State roster as a whole and the coaching staff. You hold Duke to 180 yards of total offense, and you still find a way to lose that game. FSU's a laughing stock. So give me Miami here in a beatdown, 45-3.
Ron?
I love this spot for Florida State. I think we're getting a great price. I mean, I don't like laying this many points with defenses I don't really trust. I was on Miami last week against Louisville. I'd say it would be a blowout. They didn't blow them out, but it was a win and cover. But I'm on the other side here. I mean, the home team has not done well in this series against the spread recently. Florida State still has a very sound defense. Like Chris mentioned, they held Duke to 180 yards. The turnovers and the penalties were the reason of their just not being able to win that game. But they played well defensively. If they can play as well defensively in this game, they'll definitely be able to cover the spread, I think, and potentially pull off the upset.
Yeah, Miami, the thing about the defense is that they have star players there. They have guys you're going to see in the NFL drafted very high in the NFL as well. These guys just seem out of position. Like they're just not ready for the play that's coming, especially these outside run plays, which Florida State does pretty well. They call them in weird spots, and definitely some odd play calling going on at Florida State. But I think Florida State will stand up for this one. I think that I think they at least cover in this one. I like Miami to win. I think that traditionally these games, when Miami wins, are very, very close. When Florida State wins, generally a little bit more one-sided. Most of the games have been pretty close recently. Even the years that Miami was really bad and Florida State was really good, the games were close, and I think this one's going to be close too. It's going to be a lot of Florida State fans at this game. They always have the band there. They set up their whole microphones, and they beat the war drum and circle around the stadium, and the whole thing goes on. But I like the Canes to get the win, but I like the Seminoles to cover in this one. It's probably a lot more exciting than Miami fans hope for. Go to our next game. It is Wisconsin taking on Penn State. I'm a little surprised as to how decent Wisconsin is in their recent games. After the way that they looked earlier this season, and then all of a sudden they just look like an absolute different team right now. Meanwhile, Penn State, God, they just don't seem to have that killer instinct. But boy, that game at USC was very, very impressive that second half. Ron, what do you think?
Yeah, I think Wisconsin's looked really strong. Their strength of schedule, they played some of the weaker teams in the conference, but you look at their 2 losses. Alabama was still Van Dyke at quarterback, and we've mentioned we don't really think he's a great option at QB. It took Locke a couple of weeks to get going, but now this offense is playing well. They're running the football very well, which we knew this was a strong offensive line. Their defense has been excellent recently, especially in the pass defense, the secondary. I think Wisconsin has enough here. Penn State, we talked about it from last year, how they struggled in these types of situations on the road in conference play. And, they haven't really been tested too much this season. Yes, the win at USC was nice, but it was a game they were trailing early, didn't cover the spread. Maybe not the closing number. I got 3.5 with USC, but still, I don't really trust Penn State on the road laying points right now. So I'm going to take the points with Whiskey.
We could say Wisconsin's played a fairly easy schedule, but I think they've caught teams when they're playing at their best, including USC, including Northwestern, including Purdue, including, they've played teams when they were playing well. And Penn State has had a really soft schedule. USC at this point, Lincoln Riley has lost 9 of his last 14 games. That would get you fired at Alabama in most places. And he might be on the rocks there at USC. Who knows? But I think Wisconsin's definitely going to stand up in this game. It's a home game. This is I've been to Camp Randall. It's a big stadium. And I got to say, man, these people throw a hell of a tailgate, man. I expect it to be a very lathered up crowd for this one, especially with the late start. It's like, I'm not an alcoholic. I just come from Wisconsin. I saw that shirt worn by a few people at those at my time at Wisconsin. So, I don't know. I think the Badgers show up. I'm less than impressed with this Penn State team. I got to tell you. I think these guys, they just seem to barely beat these bad teams week after week. Chris?
Yeah, I'm going to take the over here. Like Ron said, Wisconsin's offense has improved. It's, Braden Locke's looking more and more comfortable week by week. But we've also seen Wisconsin where they've gotten beaten up when they're not playing inferior competition. And I think Penn State, they do have one of the better offenses that Wisconsin will have gone up against this season. So 48 for me seems like a little bit light in the total. I think this one's probably going to hit the 50s. Could potentially be a backdoor situation for Wisconsin where maybe they lose this one 30-24 or something like that. So give me the over 48 in this one.
Next up, we got a game with LSU and Texas A&M, and this is the series that changed the rules of college football overtime. They had those games that just went on forever. Of course, some horrific officiating in those as well. Mond was the beneficiary of those. Kellen Mond, formerly of the Vikings, and did he ever play anywhere else? I think he might have got a job in Cleveland at one point. But yeah, Minnesota.
I think he was a Viking, yeah.
Yeah, nice. And, he was also at Texas A&M. And then LSU, who's actually looked really good. Starting to improve and play a lot better each week. That opening loss to USC, and since then, they went into Arkansas and just really, start to finish, really just demolished the Hogs in that game. I thought that, last week, A&M, I expected them to get off to a little bit of a slow start. I expected them to be in a much tougher game. I told Chris, just need more cowbell, man. Just more cowbell. And I just think that I think Mississippi State was just a little bit more cowbell away, from getting it done. But I think in this one, I like LSU to beat A&M. I think the Aggies are good. I think they beat Texas, in that game. But I think that in this one against LSU, probably in some trouble. Chris?
Yeah, I'm going to take LSU in the points as well. I think they match up really well with A&M here, especially from a defensive perspective. A&M's strength is running the football, and that's the strength of this LSU defense. They're 33rd in rush defense compared to 104th defending the pass. So I think LSU can match up there, and the offense for LSU can air it out, and they're going up against an A&M defense that's just above the national average in passing yardage per game allowed. So to me, I think, especially if you can get this at 3, it's at 2.5 right now, but if you can get it at 3, I really like LSU there, but I'll take the points with the Tigers in this one.
More cowbell. Ron?
Yeah, it'd be nice to get 3 points, but we can't forget that in this series back in 2018, the classic 74-72 final score where these 2.5 points would definitely come in handy. And that's why I'm going to take the points with LSU rather than just take the money line. I'm going to take the points. I think LSU is the better team. I think that Texas A&M has definitely played well, but their quarterback play is still what I believe is holding them back from being a real contender. We saw it in the beginning of the season in a home game against Notre Dame where Texas A&M just couldn't make the plays offensively to get over the hump and win that one. And I think that's going to be the case here. LSU's offensive line could be one of the best in the country. They've only had 2 sacks surrendered this season overall. And then the defense, they've been able to get a ton of pressure on opposing QBs recently. I think that's going to be an issue for the Aggies offense. I like LSU to win this game, but I'll take those points.
Next up, we go to Ann Arbor, where Michigan takes on Michigan State. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. Michigan, defending national champions, no chance of making the college football playoff this season. Meanwhile, Michigan State come in with the exact same record as Michigan. One of those weird things where I had Michigan State as a premium pick and I didn't hit enter. I don't know what the hell I was doing. But anyways, Rob, what do you think?
This is always a fun series with Michigan State. But I'm looking at the total in this one. I like the over. I think it's just too low. I think when you look at Michigan, obviously a team that runs the football a ton because their quarterback play has been so miserable. But I think that's actually going to be – I think that's going to work well for them in this game because Michigan State's had 3 straight weeks giving up a ton of yards per carry and a good amount of rushing yards to go with it. So I think the Wolverines move the ball rather easily. But I also think the Spartans can chip in. We saw one of their best performances offensively. You could argue that their best showing of the season against a very tough Iowa defense, putting up 32 points. This total's too low for me. I'm going to go with the over.
Michigan State for me. I think that, Michigan State's the better football team here. I think even in their losses this year, and some of these were bad losses, they tackled really well in a lot of these games. I like teams that can tackle really well. That game at Boston College, especially, where they jammed them inside the 5-yard line a few times. And, the only game they didn't cover was the game against Ohio State, where basically they turned the ball over inside the Ohio State 5-yard line, 10-yard line, 3 times in that game. And that's why they didn't cover in that thing. But I think it's all Sparty in this one. Payback's a bitch, and I think it's going to be a real bitch for Michigan as they fall to 500. Michigan State. Chris?
Yeah, I'm going to go Michigan State as well. I think that they had a great amount of success against a better Iowa defense than whatever Michigan's putting out right now. And, this Michigan team is just, a disaster compared to last season. Just stop, you're distracting me. I'm going to take Michigan State in the points in this one. Wouldn't be surprised if they win it outright.
Next up, Battle of Sunflower State. We're going to close it out with the big one. Kansas State taking on Kansas. Boy, college hoops just around the corner. They got to squeeze this one in before college hoop season starts, or else no one will be at the game. This one in the Little Apple. It's Manhattan. It is Kansas State, the home team. And I think they are the better team. I think Kansas State a little bit overrated this year. I think, generally we see Kansas State and the offense always looks like they're running the hidden ball play. It's like it always seems like this odd, weird play, and then the running back comes around on the sweep, or the quarterback kind of does some kind of weird thing that's like an inverted scramble of some kind. But I think that 10.5 points in a rivalry game like this is a little bit too much. Kansas coming off the big win over Houston, getting off the snide there after really kind of getting knocked around this season. But when you look at those games, 35-31 Arizona State, 38-27 against TCU, 32-28 against West Virginia, 23-20 UNLV, 23-17 against Illinois. They would have covered in this game and now all of those except for one. They would have lost by the hook. I'm going to take Kansas in this one, in the Battle of the Sunflower State. Chris?
Yeah, this one's a tough one for me, but I'm leaning towards Kansas State.
Because you're square as hell, that's why.
Well, no.
You're super square, man.
Okay.
Quadrado, as they say.
Cool. # cool story, bro. I'm going to go with Kansas State here. I don't like what I've seen from Kansas personally. I think that, they're giving up 35 to Arizona State. Yeah, 35 to Arizona State, 38 to TCU. I think Kansas State, one of, if not the best team in the Big 12. So give me Kansas State here. I think they put a statement win over a rival to further stake their claim in the Big 12.
You're stupid, stupid man. Ron?
Yeah, Chris is foolish and lacks vision. I got to go with the Jayhawks. Mitch, you stole my point. I was going to mention all the close one-score games that Kansas has been in this season. They've been, rather unlucky. It's still not been a great effort for them. I'm not just going to say they're all of a sudden a great team, but this is still a rivalry. It's still an offensive line that's excellent. Great run game. I trust Daniels. I trust the quarterback play. And I like the defense for Kansas that's improving a little bit. I mean, Houston, they were coming off a game against TCU where they had their best showing, and all of a sudden Kansas holds them to 14 points, only 3 yards to carry, 6 sacks earned in that one. I'm going to go with the Jayhawks plus the points, and I would sprinkle on the money line as well.
All right. Well, that wraps up this week's college football show. We've got a lot of other games out on the board that we could have covered. We will be covering on our Saturday college football show as well as in our individual videos, including Colorado-Cincinnati, which I think has a chance to be a pretty solid game. Kentucky against Auburn. Kentucky coming off that tough loss against Florida. Houston, Utah. Someone's has got to do something, right? Anyways, it's a lot of good games this week. There's a lot of competitive ball games. Anyways, Chris, anything left to close it out here?
You left the biggest game off the board, Wagner UMass. I mean, I don't know.
It's Wagner.
Oh, it's Wagner. Oh, sorry. I'm not familiar with things in the Orlando area. Forgive me, please. But,
it's a Mickey Mouse town.
Yeah, no, I'm just ready for this weekend's college football. A lot of great matchups. Even, like I said, like you said, some of the ones that we didn't even cover here.
Ron?
Yeah, UMass money line, that one. That's just a given. But, yep, nice card of college football. And UCF is going to take down BYU. Can't wait for it.
Next week, I believe we start Maction. 2 weeks, I guess. 2 weeks away from Maction. Next week, same crap. A lot of Sam Houston. Thanks, everyone. Make it a winning day. We appreciate each and every one of you. We'll be back next week for Week 10. We go double digits on college football. Week 10 of the 2024 season. Make it a winning day. Be sure to check out all of our videos at pickdawgz.com. Got it all covered for you. NFL, NBA, college football, college hoops on the way. Major League Baseball World Series starts this week. Lost in the Shuffle, and, of course, the Reach Around. Chris Ruffalo's daily hockey video. Make it a winning day, everyone. We appreciate all of you.